Well, our guest today is Judge David Young. Many people in the United States know who Judge Young is because he hosts a 30-minute daily television court show in many of the most major and medium and smaller markets across the country. We've asked Judge Young to come on to discuss about the hot cases of the day, whether it's O.J. Simpson's latest brush with the law, Michael Vick thinking that it was okay to sponsor dogfighting, Britney Spears' battle to regain custody of her children, or the latest Hollywood star to get picked up driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Judge Young will also answer your legal questions as well, whether they are questions that you have about something in your life or something in the news that you're aware of. So please get your hands up, those of you who are in the Paltalk virtual auditorium, and be prepared to talk to Judge Young during the show. Now, prior to becoming a TV judge, he was on the bench in Miami. He was elected to the circuit court 3 times. He was known for his tough but fair sentencing, perhaps best known for his tough sentencing of 2 commercial airline pilots who were convicted of, believe it or not, trying to fly while intoxicated. Prior to his stint on the bench, Young served as an assistant state attorney in the Miami-Dade County, serving under no other than Janet Reno, who later became Attorney General of the United States of America. Judge David Young, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
It's great to be there. Be here, be there. I'm everywhere. Thank you.
Yes, and I know you're joining us from the Sunshine State, where it seems there are always stories involving illegal activity in Florida. In fact, interestingly, we were talking before the start of the show. I don't know if you're aware of this case about the cops down there in Florida chasing a B&E guy across from the apartment that he had burglarized into a pond, and the guy got eaten up by an alligator in the pond. Now that's what I call justice.
I read that this morning, and I thought to myself, there really is a God, isn't there?
Yeah, did you ever think of doing that, sentencing a guy to swim across the moat while there are alligators in there? I think that we wouldn't have much of a recidivism problem if you had done that while you were on the bench.
Well, one time I did think about having a drug dealer giving him a whole plate of cocaine, and as much cocaine as he wanted, and he could sniff as much as he could for 15 minutes and let's see what happened to him.
What is it with these guys? I mean, you throw them in jail or in prison, and they serve their time. Most of them are released early because of the overcrowding issue, and they're back out in the streets, and they continue to be miscreants on the streets of this nation, even though we probably incarcerate more people per capita than any other Western nation in the world here in the United States.
The problem is, once you do serve time in prison, if let's say you have a drug problem, that's really is the root of your criminal existence. You just can't get off the stuff. You go to prison and you're warehoused for a year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. Once you come out of prison, if the addiction is not addressed, you're only going to do what you know how to do, and you go back to the same type of life. Whereas if you had meaningful drug rehabilitation in prison, plus meaningful job training, hopefully when people came out, they will be rehabilitated and they could make, be a productive member of society. But unfortunately, we don't want to spend money in that vein. We'd rather spend money building jails and not supplying them with the means necessary to make people ex-offenders, truly ex-offenders. It's sad.
So other than training people while they're in prison, what are other things that we could do? Do we need to revamp the drug laws so that people get an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves mentally as opposed to going to prison for the crimes that they committed? Or do we still need to throw a person who is breaking the law to support a habit into the joint?
What we need to do is there really needs to be drug counseling and rehabilitation once an individual is in the state prison system. But it needs to go further than that. Yes, people are released early, and they're released early because most states have a jail cap that's been imposed upon them by a federal judge. In Florida, the law is that a inmate must serve 85% of her or his time, which is pretty significant. But you still have that 15% window. So what I've always been a proponent of is putting them on a conditional release wherein if drugs is really what the issue is, have them go under intense drug therapy for the remaining time until you lose jurisdiction over the person. And with meaningful drug therapy, not only means getting off of drugs and going to classes, but also develop a trade. Because if you create jobs, if there's something for them to do once they get out and they get the addiction under control, then more likely than not, they're not going to come back again. And that's really what we want. But unless you get to the root, and the most common root to all these issues is drugs and alcohol, the revolving door is going to go around and around and around, and continue to go round and around and around, and it comes out here. We got to pay for it.
But Judge David Young, who's going to hire somebody with a record? I know somebody who was actually caught up in a drug raid. It was a relative in that individual's house who was the real target of the investigation. And this person, was not involved in drug trafficking at all. And yet they found in that person's house, and this was the parent of the adult child, and the parent of the adult child, was charged with possession with intent, and got a court-appointed attorney. This actually happened in your state, and then was told by the court-appointed attorney to plead, and so they pled to a lower count, and they were put on probation, but when they went to apply for jobs, they were asked, were you ever convicted of a felony? And if they said yes, then they weren't given the job. If they said no, then they would have been subsequently violated the term of their probation, and they would have been thrown into jail for lying, basically under oath. And so I don't think as a society we're prepared to embrace people who have served time, even if they have been habilitated and trained while in prison.
Well, that's why I suggested having meaningful drug and alcohol treatment and then follow it out with outpatient treatment, which would include job placement. It seems to me that there are many wonderful people out there in the United States who will give people a second chance, and especially if they know that they're being monitored by the courts. And there's no reason why the courts or the states cannot have a job bank available to it to place people with various employers. And I think you need some creativity. Unfortunately, we're not very creative in this country when it comes to this type of stuff. We simply like to, throw them in jail, lock them up, and throw away the key. Well, as we find out time and time again, you can throw away the key, but the key's always found by somebody sooner or later, and they're out. And it's a vicious cycle. So I think we really need to be creative in dealing with this issue.
What kind of cases come before you on your television program, David Young?
None like that. I tell you that. I don't lock anybody up. I used to, but not anymore. The cases that are on this,
you can't. Right. You can't handle a criminal case as a television judge. They have to be civil cases, and both parties have to agree prior to going on the program to abide by your decision, because this is obviously, even though you're a judge and it's that kind of a setting, it's actually extrajudicial what you're doing, right?
Well, the way it's referred to is binding arbitration. Both parties agree that I will be the arbitrator. I'll be the one that makes the final decision, and they can't go to court. They can't take an appeal. What's done is done, basically. And people like that for several reasons. One, they get a free trip to New York, where we film our show, and they get free room and board, and they get, the limousine taking them to and from the studio. And for some people, it'll be their only time to get to New York to see, the incredible sights of such an incredible city. Other people just want to get a quick resolution. I'm sure many of your listeners can appreciate the fact that when you file a proceeding in court, it could take weeks, it could take months, sometimes it could take years. Where in 30 minutes, I'll come down with a decision, and it'll be